Welcome back to Armchair Sports Talk. This is Brandon Harris. Today, we're going to take you through today's topics, breaking down the SEC, best conference in college football top to bottom. Is it going to be a Georgia and Alabama rematch this year? And this year that Kirby Smart can get the Georgia Bulldogs over the hump. Introducing our college football expert, Mr. Sean Hicks. Sean, how you doing today?
Doing good, Brandon. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I tell you what, I got up early this morning. I got your message that you had posted a couple of our videos, and so I felt like I was back in school cramming for an exam to get ready to try and go back and forth with you tonight. So, yeah, I'm hoping I'm up for the task. But
Only difference is you're not waking up 5 a.m. back in school.
That's very true. I'm probably staying up until 5 and then crashing for an hour maybe for the exam. But anyhow, we're going to run through the SEC. So this has been debated over the offseason that this is the best the SEC has ever been. So kind of give us a rundown of the conference overall and tell us how good it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a question. This is the best the SEC has been since its heyday of Saban, Meyer, Richt, when you had Cam Newton and Auburn. I don't want to say Gene Chizik because, let's be honest, that was Gus Malzahn's team. But when you had them running Roth over everybody, when you had Ohio State that was good, but Michigan was way down, the Big Ten was not good. And they really were the kings of the castle, and it was whoever was going to win the SEC was going to win the national championship. I don't think it's quite like that this year, but this is the best the conference has been. Using the S&P Plus rankings, preseason rankings, here's what we're projecting. 6 of the top 15 teams are going to be in the SEC. 4 are going to be in the SEC West all by itself, with Georgia and Florida being in the SEC East. And then Missouri and South Carolina are right outside the top 15 about, I think they're the high teens and in the low 20s. So what that is, a really deep, good conference. And I think one of the biggest reasons here is twofold. One, LSU has got their act together. They're a big boy again. And that's a big deal to the overall strength of the conference. But to me, it's the Mississippi State, the Missouri, the South Carolina getting their act together. Now there aren't really that many easy games. Okay, maybe Ole Miss, maybe Vandy. But besides that, I mean, you're a Tennessee away from this truly being the peak.
So from top to bottom, yeah, you're right. I mean, you see a lot of good quarterback play. Both sides of the division, you're going through strength of schedule. I mean, the SEC East in particular, and a couple of different sites that I saw, South Carolina being number 1. You see a Georgia and a Florida on that list. Just incredible talent from top to bottom, as we mentioned. You've got some up-and-comers like a Texas A&M and a Jimbo Fisher coach team. I think you hit the nail right on the head there with your LSU analysis. I think they're back in the running. Just an incredible conference from top to bottom, as you mentioned. But there still are tiers in the conference. As you mentioned, the middle of the pack, the parity, and how it's going to improve quite a bit, maybe with still your Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Tennessee at the bottom there, maybe in Arkansas possibly. But Georgia and Alabama, though, they're at the very top, no doubt, right? Is anybody close? Maybe LSU?
Yeah, I think they're a tier above. I don't think there's a question like that, right? But I don't think this is last year where everything, it was just pretty much, put them in Sharpie, right, in the national championship game. Just nobody was touching them that year. You still didn't know what you had in LSU. You still didn't know what you had in Florida. You knew they could kind of lose a game, and they were going to be fine. They were still going to be guaranteed penciled in from what you're going to be able to see. Like maybe Auburn was last year. But I think this year you've got a couple teams that can legitimately claim that, if a couple balls bounce the right way, that, something goofy could happen. I think that's what you want like this, because what it makes is every game exciting and interesting. So still a tier above all of them, right? But not invincible the way I felt like they were last year. I think, and we'll get to this in our predictions, but I think both of them could stumble on the way through.
Absolutely. So I guess if I'm just going to kind of expand here, I just want to kind of create these tiers for our viewers. Sure. So we're going from the top. We're looking at, your Alabama, your Georgia, and then LSU kind of on the periphery. Who would you put there at the 4 and 5 slots?
That's a good. So rather than breaking them, like ranking them, let's just do it in tiers, right? So tier 1, Alabama, Georgia, right? Let's just stop there. The next tier down to me, I think, is probably LSU, probably Florida, though that could be a bit controversial. And then really, I mean, probably just those two. And then you probably have the SEC West just conundrum of whatever Mississippi.
Teams that are going to beat up on each other all year.
Yeah, that are going to all be real good teams, right, and have really crappy records that piss off their fan base. The Texas A&M, the Mississippi State,
the Auburns of the world. You're going to throw in a Missouri. I think Missouri could probably be in that pack, right?
Yeah, potentially. I'd probably put them one more tier below in the still good, but probably not in the if something fluky happens, will win the conference, but can ruin somebody's night on a weird day, which is what Missouri and South Carolina are. And the fact you have 4 tiers like that, which I think are all legitimately good teams, that tells you how damn good the conference is.
Right. So for any given Saturday, a team could go on the road to any of these teams in any of these tiers, really, and basically pull off an upset, which from a lot of these other conferences, you cannot even speak of that, or in previous years in the SEC for that matter.
That's a great point. I mean, every road game is a good win in the SEC. I think that should be, what's going to be frustrating is because a lot of them are not going to have great records. Fan base is going to be kind of pissed off. But man, 8-4. If you're in the SEC West, and you're 8-4. You're probably
a heck of a year. I think.
That's a heck of a year.
To that point, I think if looking at the strength of schedule for a Texas A&M, if that team they had the worst luck when they pulled the straws to make that schedule, but if they go 8-4, that was a heck of a job by Jimbo Fisher and
that's a top 10 team.
Yeah,
that's a top 10 team if they go 8-4. I mean, Jimbo Fisher deserves the money they make it, but let's be honest, we know fan bases, right?
They always want it more, and they want it now. So let's go ahead then, and we're going to jump in first to the SEC East. So this is our old stomping grounds. Both of us are University of Georgia grads. For those of y'all that have not checked this out, Sean did a breakdown of the University of Georgia's season. It was an excellent in-depth analysis of the season. He gave predictions. We're going to touch on that a little bit today. And basically, off the top, just give us a breakdown quickly of the SEC East.
Yeah, I mean, again, Georgia's the top tier, right? They really probably only have one team in the second tier, which is Florida, that I think could potentially be the champions of the SEC East. I'm obviously not predicting it, but, weird things happen. It's college football, right? What if Fromm gets hurt, things like that. But Georgia is the class of the conference. There's a lot of reasons. Their recruiting is so much better than everybody else. They've only lost one SEC game, or I guess 2 if you count the last year. 2 SEC games in the last 2 years since Kirby Smart really got things going. Their blue chip ratio, I think, is in the 70s now. They're up there with Alabama and Ohio State of the untouchables, which basically meaning their potential is higher than everybody else. They return a lot, too. There's not a whole lot of lost production that you're going to be able to see. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think Georgia being as good as they were last year, again, testament to Kirby, because if you look at it, in a lot of ways, this is their year in a few areas. So, I expect them to be really darn good.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I think Georgia fans in general, actually Paul Feinbaum had some callers call in this week, and they were Georgia fans, and they were asking, is this a championship or bust type of season? And it was overwhelming, the response from the Georgia fans that said, yes, this is it. But if you go back 2 seasons ago, after Kirby's first year, and you would have said, hey, we're going to be in the national championship in 2017, we're going to be on the doorstep of that in 2018, 90%, 95% of Georgia fans would have taken that in a heartbeat compared to what we've been doing previous time.
Honestly.
Yeah,
they wouldn't have believed you.
Right. After a true freshman, Jake Fromm, just incredible turnaround. So I think it almost proved to be a blessing and a curse for them because now they have these expectations where just being a Georgia fan, and you pointed this out in your breakdown of the team, but it's just like the tough luck continuously goes in that way of the Georgia fan where they have the tipped ball or, the 3rd and 26, just
the Hail Mary.
The Hail Mary against Tennessee.
Only catching in 2012.
Yeah, exactly. Why catch that ball? Just knock it down. The things that happen to Georgia don't seem to happen to the Clemsons, the Alabamas, the Auburn fans. The Auburn, this is what drives me nuts about it, is they always get the ball bouncing in the other direction, it seems like, and they're good fortune.
It does seem like it, yes.
Yeah, so I think
must be all that money donated to a church to get us a player.
I guess it paid off in some ways.
In a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah, exactly. A couple championships. So, but basically my point is just that this is Kirby's year, and I hate to see that that I'm not going to say negativity, but just that thought is in people's head, that stigma is still there, that Georgia can't get over the hump. But I think there's several things pointing to the fact that they can still do it, and I think they have a really good chance this year to do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is tough to look at, and you realize that the record that Kirby had in his first 3 years is identical to the record that Mark Richt had in his first 3 years, right?
Right.
There are reasons to think that won't necessarily happen, recruiting rankings being the obvious. There's a few to think it might, which we will touch on. But I know when I did my Georgia preview, you had a few things that you maybe not disagreed with, but thought should be fleshed out on a different side.
Right. So basically, which I thought was a great point that I hadn't heard before you brought it up, actually, was the fact that Georgia is essentially recreating the mold of a 2010, 2011 Alabama team. And after putting some thought into it, I got to thinking, like, man, is that really all that bad? You think of tough physical teams, play solid defense, that's disciplined, that runs the football. They throw the ball when they need to, can make the plays, but they don't lose games. They make the other team lose the game. They make enough solid, good plays. A couple other things we've already mentioned, but the blue chip rating, Georgia's now in the top 3 of the country. And also an interesting stat by Bill Conley, who's now over at ESPN. But basically, to sum it up, size matters. In all facets of life sometimes, but in college football too. I think you add in size and speed. That's the biggest difference with this Georgia team, because as you mentioned in your preview, this is the first Kirby Smart team from top to bottom, and the depth is here that he didn't have in the previous years. I think the defense last year was not as good as maybe people thought on paper, but they continuously, reload new players. Athletically, they're long. I think some of the key players they have at key positions have put on 15, 20 pounds in the offseason. And not only that, but they brought in a lot of really sneaky recruits that I think really have an opportunity not to be relied on this upcoming season, but be able to come in like a George Pickens at wide receiver and make an impact play here or there late in the game, on the road, in these tough SEC road games we're talking about, to really take the ball and run with it. I think Nakobe Dean's going to make a huge difference at linebacker. I think we've got Reed back in the second. I think our corners have bigger size now. When you boil it down, though, it's going to come down to the coordinators. I think that's the biggest question mark still for me, because I wasn't as down on Jim Chaney. I know you sound like you're somewhat of a fan. You speak very highly of him, and I think he did a good job. But it's really going to be interesting. Can James Coley come in there? What are the differences going to be? I think they need to stick with who they are. I think Zamir White is going to be a name that could be a household name by the end of the season. That tandem of he and DeAndre Swift is going to be really interesting. So, yeah, but, I mean, we don't return much at receiver, but I think the guys we do bring back have all the talent in the world. They just haven't really maybe had the chances yet to make those impact plays. So I think we line up on paper with those guys, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the coaching staff put their conditions to win, and the coordinators and coaching staff being able to make those adjustments mid-game that the Jim Chaneys, Mel Tucker were not able to do halfway through, whether it was the national championship 2 years ago or last year, halfway through the SEC championship.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting points that you bring up there, Brandon. And I think, when I talk about the weakness of receiver, everybody's got weaknesses on their team, even Bama. Nobody's right. But to me, I think you brought up the overall philosophy, what they're going to as, is it a bad thing being Alabama 2010, 2011? Hell no. That means you're going to be one of the best teams in the nation. But the reason why I bring it up as a negative is because when you are recruiting and you are trying to be one of the big boys, right? You're national championship every year. But it kind of seems like, not just philosophically, but the way you're built is for something that people were complaining about Alabama as being a problem 7 years ago, right? Take a look at the national championship game. What did both offenses? They were very spread out. They were still down nose running the hill football teams, right? Like, still very much that was an identity. But they were able to be a lot more creative than we ever saw from Georgia. Because they were able to use a running quarterback, because they were able to really utilize an RPO to a better effect. Their peak was higher than I think what a Georgia's peak is with what they're being able to run. And I think they were still able to do that while dominating in the trenches. I mean, Clemson had 3 defensive linemen go in the first round. I mean, good God. Like, they were able to play what I think is modern football, which is really being able to stretch everyone both horizontally as well as vertically. And I don't know if Georgia was built as well to be able to do that. And it comes down to, I mean, look at their passing numbers, right? I think I said in my preview that Georgia did not win a game if they passed the ball more than 25 times.
Yeah, that's a great stat you brought up. That was really interesting.
And that's insane. I mean, that is old school football. But I think the problem is when you do that conservative approach, what you're really allowing is a bunch of randomness to bite you.
Right. Now that brings up a good point, though, because like I said, a lot of that, the way the blueprint of the team is, yes, to control the clock, is to run the football and be ahead and let the other team beat themselves ultimately.
Right. Right.
So to my point earlier, is this offense and this coaching staff going to be able to figure out how to keep the foot on the gas and still be aggressive and not just basically try and run the clock out? Because that's what it looked like. Even back to the Bobo era, a lot of times I would feel that way. So is this coaching staff going to be any different? And how do they do that?
What Georgia's coaching decisions this year made no sense to me, right? Now, I'm not saying they're going to be bad. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying you don't know. You're Georgia. You can get anybody in the nation. You should not know if your coordinators have no track record.
Right.
It's basically what you're getting. You got internal hires that you have no idea if they are really upcut. I mean, Chaney, what you thought about him, he had a really steady track record of 2 things: developing quarterbacks and having really productive offenses. He's done that for years and years and years. You don't have that with it. So one, who's your quarterback coach? No one proven. And what is the offense going to look like? It's not. I'm not saying it's going to be bad. I'm saying you don't know. And I expect better than not knowing. Yeah, I expect better than not knowing.
I think, and I think your prediction was really all we can go off of right now, because you have to go off what we've been shown, right? And the changes that have been made, the players they're returning. And there's really nothing other than just optimism from a Georgia fan standpoint to think that this team's going to be any differently. I mean, I did bring up some good counter arguments, but ultimately until they do get over that hump, I think, that's all we can figure is, hey, they're going to be really close. They're going to, be right there. But unfortunately, we got to, we're not going to believe it till we see it. But I do think that they have a better in years past than they have previously. I think before it was kind of false optimism, but this year I really do think they have a better shot.
I think Holloman changes that, honestly, quite a bit, because I know you spoke really good, talented receivers. Man, freshman receivers suck. All of them suck. Even the ones that are 5-star out of this world talent suck as freshmen. And Holloman was your guy to be just a beast this year. I mean, he was going to be great. And I do think losing that does hurt if they get behind at any point, right?
True. Yeah. I mean, anytime you go against your bread and butter, if a team's traditionally runs the football, they're forced to throw it, it's going to be tough. I think you're a little bit lean in terms of the depth at tight end as well, but we can go off to a point you made in your segment. The offensive line is probably got 4 NFL starters on that line right now, but at least 3.
It's probably the best in the nation, right?
Definitely. So I think we can lean on that. But you're right. We can't get down. They can't come out flat. They've got to play the first quarter strong. And to me, that goes back to the coordinators, which is the great unknown. So we could really go on for another hour or so talking about Georgia football, but always good stuff there. Then we go down to the number 2 slot, which I'm pretty sure is probably unanimous across the board, is the Florida Gators. So they've been in the news a lot this offseason, Sean. You did another breakdown of them in the season. Tell us about the Gators.
If it wasn't for the offseason, they would probably be my breakout pick for the SEC, the guys that I think really could take a step level. So let's get out of this way. The stuff that happened in the offseason is ridiculous and terrible. It's unfortunate it happens at so many football teams, but it does seem like it has created a bit of a problem. The whispers are around the program, right? And you don't want that to go into when you have a team that I think is ready to really make that leap. Now, like I said, I'm not saying it's going to crush it, but it gives me the willies, right?
Right.
Like, you don't want that. That's bad.
Yeah, and I think another few things to look at too is you lose 4 offensive linemen off last year's team. They've lost a couple defensive backs. I believe one was a domestic violence issue. The other just left the program in a transfer. They did pick up a potential stud and former 5-star Brenton Cox from Georgia this year, but still looking for that waiver to see if he can play or not this year. So top to bottom, though, it's going to be tough for Felipe Franks to repeat performance last year if he's losing 4 linemen. That's going to be tough.
See, it's going to be interesting, right? Because they lose the 4 linemen, right? But everybody else is back. And I think they do really have a chance to – I think Felipe Franks, people should give him a break to a certain extent, right? Because his freshman year was a disaster. But to be fair, that entire team was a disaster. I don't think you can blame that on a true freshman and just this hole of a team that they had.
Yeah, that one might have been on Jim McElwain, ultimately.
Yeah, Jim McElwain. Hey, head coach of Central Michigan for some
He's a Chippewa now.
Chippewa, fire up chips. And then you have his beginning of his sophomore year. He looked rough, man. Looked real rough in a lot of it. But after the Georgia game, he really started to put together a lot of good performances. And if you really think about that as his freshman year, in a lot of ways it was, considering it was a completely new offense under just this not black pit of negative expectations that you have as a team. I think you liked his progression. I think he's got a lot more leap to be able to make than a typical 2-year starter going to a 3-year because of the area that he was in. And, man, he's got every receiver turning, and he's got some good guys. Tyree Cleveland hasn't been talked about yet, but has a round 1 potential in him. I mean, he is fast and big. Second year under the offense, if the offensive line can be okay, right? I'm not talking about great, just okay. I think what you can expect is a pretty huge jump in their performance on offense, but it's probably going to be a very explosively, maybe not efficient jump. A lot of big explosive plays, maybe can't string things together much, which I think will probably be their downfall. When you look at Georgia, who relies on, I'll let you get 20 yards every now and then, but I'm not letting you get 60 yards.
It's going to be tough they're going to be in a lot of close games on the road, a lot of penalties, procedure type deals, and you put those young guys and experienced guys in those positions. Definitely will be interesting to see, but it seems like, Dan Mullen throughout his career really has a way to kind of mask holes in certain teams and cover up their inefficiencies. I mean, look what he did at Mississippi State. I mean, that team was the number 1 team in the country at some point, and we all know they didn't have a top 3 blue chip rating at that point or at any point. So the guy knows how to cover up some inefficiencies, and he's proven to be very good at it. So Florida, there might be the O-line this year, but we'll see what what Mullen comes up with.
Yeah, and I think the second point of why I just couldn't make that prediction besides the offseason was Todd Grantham, who you, of course, know from DCing back in Georgia.
Oh, man.
Let me say this because I talk a lot of crap about my preview of Todd Grantham. He's a good defensive coordinator. He's just massively flawed in that he is a very emotional blitzer, first of all. And he asks a lot of young players to do things I don't know they're always capable of doing, which allows a lot of big plays. And I think when you look at Florida this year, I think that's going to be their downfall, that they're going to give up a lot of big plays, specifically in the run game. And I think when you go against, say, I don't know, a team we may have just mentioned that is the best offensive line in the country that you probably have to beat to win the conference, that's going to be their undoing. 10-3 this year or 9-3 is my prediction. I'm going in second in the conference. That's the same record of last year, but it's going to be a better 9-3, right? Last year felt fluky. This is going to be more of like something we can expect and build upon.
Well, certainly needed. They need some positive momentum back in that program after this offseason. But moving on to number 3, we have a team that I mentioned a minute ago, probably arguably one of the toughest schedules in the country, not just the conference, but the South Carolina Gamecocks. So how are they looking for this season?
Man, South Carolina is the 90-year-old grandparent that absolutely should not be driving and has somehow found their keys with Alzheimer's and is going down the highway. That's what South Carolina is, because they're going to wreck somebody's season. They're not – listen, their schedule's too tough. They just don't have the talent. They're not going to win the SEC East. They're not going to be a surprise sleeper to make a noise. But somebody's season's getting ruined. That's all I'm saying with South Carolina, because they're talented enough to be able to do it. Jacob Brantley's a really good quarterback. I truly believe that, even if he's 1,000 years old. I swear he's been starting there since the Nixon administration. Like, man. And they have a lot of really, really good receivers around them. I mean, this could be a really dynamic passing offense. Problem is, from an offense standpoint, they cannot run the football. I mean, just cannot run the football even a little bit. And I just don't see that changing this year.
Well, it'll certainly be interesting to see just who it is that they can wreck in terms of the season. But I think we're going to see, as we've mentioned, a lot of those upsets happening this year. That environment, I've been firsthand down there to Williams-Brice, I believe it's called, in Columbia. One of the coolest college football atmospheres, but it is definitely difficult for the visiting team to play in that environment. So they'll catch somebody by surprise, no doubt. We're looking at Missouri and Kentucky. We got Vanderbilt as well to round out. Let's just hit the key points on there. What do you see out of those teams?
Missouri is a surprise team that can have a really good record and be really good, and is not bowl eligible, and it could really suck. To be honest, if there's a team that surprises everybody and does some really weird stuff this year, I think it's going to be Missouri. Because in my power rankings, right, they're right below Florida in it. They have Kelly Bryant transferring from Clemson. I think their offense is going to be really good. They have a freshman receiver who was a freshman receiver last year going into sophomore that's going to break out. The dude is going to be awesome. His name is Knox. He's going to be amazing. I think they have a really good potential to be very good on both offense and defense with enough explosive capabilities that they can really surprise something. If a bunch of weird things bounce, they can make some noise. I mean, they have Georgia on the road. Okay, they're probably going to get crushed, right? But every other team they have that is kind of in that 50-50 or lower to loss area, they get at home this season. That makes a huge difference. Kentucky, man, just enjoy last year. That's all I got to tell you. Just really wrap yourself around it and enjoy it like a wet blanket, because it's not going to happen. You guys this year, you weren't that good last year. You won a lot of fluky games. Listen, if you're 6-6 this year, 7-5, be happy with it. I don't think last year was the leap of a program. I feel like it was a lot like Colorado in 2016. Got up here, woo, things are going, and we're right back down because of Kentucky.
Right.
Vanderbilt is so on the bottom that I think Derek Mason usually has them competitive-ish enough, but they just don't have it.
I think the biggest thing there, like with the Kentucky, they lost so many, veteran contributors from that team. And that's the difference from the top to the bottom of this conference. Like we're saying, is year after year, who can put up those recruiting numbers and keep just recycling talent and putting them in the league. That's why they can't compete every year. So they're going to be looking forward to basketball season once again.
Yeah, it's without a doubt. It's not just talent. Last year was so fluky. I mean, just so fluky in so many ways. And then when they really played a team of true measure, Georgia, they got swamped and destroyed, and that's just because who they are.
Right.
Enjoy last year. It was great. 7-5 guys. That's your goal.
All right. Well, that'll still get them in a bowl game and winning record. It's good for most years as a UK football fan, I would imagine. Let's jump over to the other side. The SEC West, the daunted SEC West. Alabama, of course, on top, still likely to win, but you're saying it's going to be a tough road. So tell us about that tough road for Bama, Sean.
Man, this is hell. This division, that's just the best way to put it. This is going to be a miserable walk through everybody. Bama's so much better than everybody else that they'll probably win, blow people out in ways they will usually do. But every game everybody's so good, right? Except for Ole Miss and Arkansas. And I think Arkansas is actually going to be a lot improved this year. It's going to be tough because every road game is going to feel like you're going to get the best out of everybody in the crowd, and it's going to be miserable. You've got 3 other top 15 teams that you're going to have to go to. I mean, listen, this is going to be a fun experience for anybody getting through this division.
So going through last year, Alabama just absolutely demolished their entire schedule, if I remember right, correctly?
They were Alabama's S&P Plus ranking at the end of the year was the best S&P Plus ranking since the BCS Bowl since the BCS sub-game. So in the last 21 years, they were the best team based off of analytics that there has ever been.
Okay, so I guess my question is, is the division that much closer to Bama to at least make it more competitive in the West or in the SEC in general this year?
Yeah, I think so. I do, because I think you've got the talent of LSU. You've got the whatever Auburn does every year, which throw that one up there. Who knows? They're very good. You've got Mississippi State, who is really, really good that no one wants to talk about, and LSU, and then Texas A&M under second year of Jimbo Fisher. That road is so tough, right? Even if you are the best team or one of the best teams in college football, you're not likely to just blow everybody out, because those teams, while good last year, are all better, give or take. And I think that's the big thing to me.
Well, I think they're going to get LSU at home this year, right? Bama?
I believe so, yes.
Auburn, they're playing with two freshman quarterbacks in all likelihood, so that's going to be tough for them. I do like LSU. We talked about them a little bit. I think Joe Burrow, although opinions on him are kind of up or down, I think he, along with that good supporting cast that have a new offensive coordinator, a new approach, might be a team that could compete there. But again, being in Tuscaloosa, that's going to be a challenge. So who does that leave us with? Upset-wise, maybe it's a Mississippi State. They do a cross-conference game with Tennessee, right?
Tennessee and South Carolina are their cross-conference games.
They're not going to – neither of those teams are going to get close to beating Bama. So the path seems to be pretty clear, even though the competition is pretty tremendous.
Football's weird, and I think all the teams are good enough to take advantage of the weirdness. And I don't know if you can say that every year, right? And I think that's what you're really looking. Previewing Bama is almost boring because they're so good that you're trying to pick off five-star offensive linemen who are redshirt sophomores, right? And the fact is, as long as Tua stays healthy and Sarkisian doesn't, excuse the pun, tank their offense, then I just don't see them losing. I do think their defense is going to be worse than last year. I do think that there's going to be a drop-off. The secondary has dealt with injury issues all last year, and I think it's to be expected that I don't know if they're going to make the leap that some are hoping they make this year. But again, those are talking about nitpicks on the only very top team, right?
Right, and that's what this time of year is. We have to try to find something to criticize or try to see like what might be the downside of this or that team or that for their season and their outlook. But to that point, Bama, I read where they did lose. Was it outside linebacker to injury for the year or transfer? Maybe. Yeah,
that was a hurt. It wasn't Dylan Moses though. I'm losing his name right now, but it was expected to be his compatriot that was going to wreck shop and maybe take, if there was a weakness on the defensive line, maybe take over for that. So that'll have an effect, but like I said, they're almost boring to talk about. But I do think this is a really interesting side of the conference to talk about, because LSU to me is a really interesting team because a lot of people really love them, and I just don't.
Well, tell us why.
Yeah, it's for LSU, and I admit this is my bias coming through, right? I hate watching them play. Like they're just, everything looks so hard when you're LSU, right? Like you have all this talent in the world on offense, and everything looks so damn hard. Last year they were completely unexplosive offense. A lot of it from a passing game was they hoped Joe Burrow could run around and do something. They had to do like 6 4th-and-1s against Georgia to be able to beat them. It's just the analytics love them because at the end of the day, the defense was so good and their offense was efficient enough. But I just can't see – I just don't see the explosiveness or the creativity there that they can really hang once they get up and try to play with your really big boys. And because of the way they play, I feel like they're asking, like they happened last year, a team that was beneath them, and was last year, Florida, to be able to beat them in ways that they shouldn't. If I I love Coach O as a personality, but what are you doing with your coordinator hire? A guy that was in the NFL and a tight ends coach forever, you got to get a guy off the Les Miles offensive staff, and you're like, that's the guy I got to get to run my team. What are you doing, man?
That's a good point. I mean, change, the grass isn't always greener. Change, bringing in this guy, somebody different might not might not do the job for you. But again, every year you line that roster up, though, like you're saying, it's a very sexy, good-looking roster. But
so beautiful.
Does look. You're right. Just from the eye test alone, they're still stuck in the LSU from 10 years ago too. Like if you look back at those teams, like always had the top recruits, the top quarterbacks coming in, everyone just waiting on this guy to be this superstar player, just can't seem to break through. For whatever reason.
Do you believe in Joe Burrows? I don't. Like I think he can be competent. But
I saw enough to where I feel like he can be the top of the line. I mean, he's not going to win the Heisman, or he's not going to. But I think he's enough with that supporting cast to be competitive and at least be in the conversation to compete with Bama. On the road, like I said, I think it's going to be tough. But I did see enough from Joe Burrows in that 7 overtime game. Made a lot of key plays there, very very clutch. But I think a lot of it was just the scheme, the schematics, and the way they drew things up doesn't really help anybody. So you're right. I mean, it goes back to the coaching. If they do make enough adjustments with their game planning, I think they certainly have the talent to be more of an exciting team to watch games.
This is my bust team of the conference. The team I really think is going to finish below expectations and really disappoint some people. And it just comes down to the lack of creativity on offense. I mean, the defense is going to be a top 8 team. Defense in the nation. Their defense coordinator, Dave Aranda, is awesome. There's no question about that. But they're going to get in some close games, and the bounces aren't going to go the way they went last year. I think, this time when Joe Burrow rambles out, he's not going to, hit his receiver for 20 yards. He's going to get sacked, or it's going to get picked off. They're not going to get every one like they did last year. And the explosive plays are going to come at the wrong time this year, not the right time. So, yeah, man, I think they're the best team of the year.
Well, we will just have to wait and see. But one team that we completely kind of skipped over there from the East is the old Tennessee Volunteers. So give us a quick recap on them. We didn't even mention them at all in our recap.
I thought I was doing a kindness by skipping over them. I felt like we weren't skipping them as much as I was saying that, listen, I think Scott Pruitt, he can be a good coach. Like, let's give him time. Let's just agree. Let's not talk about him.
Let's not even mention how rough the next couple of years might be.
They're going to be better this year. They got better over the year, right? They somehow beat Auburn last year. Listen, man, if you get to a bowl game, you did a good job. That's my area. I will say I think their quarterback has some talent on their team.
Yes, yeah.
I do think that will give them a better chance. But just given everybody else, like I said, I think skipping over them was probably a kindness. Again, Tennessee fans, give Pruitt some time. That's what I ask. Like next year, let's have a conversation about getting into the Missouri-South Carolina tier. That's your goal.
Jarrett Garantano is his name, and you're right. He absolutely has a lot of talent. And they also got quite a few, if I remember right, they had a few transfers. It took advantage of that transfer portal a little bit. Got some players coming in to Aubrey Solomon. That's one of them that came in on board.
Probably not going to play though. And as someone who watched Aubrey Solomon play a lot, I would be surprised if he becomes a outright dominant.
Well, either way, they got an influx of talent from a lot of different places. But I think Pruitt can recruit, although I think it's going to take a little bit longer.
It's a lot better. Their recruit's a lot better.
Yeah, to pick up from where Butch Jones left off, Jones showed he could recruit, but they couldn't develop and the whole thing.
They couldn't keep him. He was left – last year was year 0.
Right.
If we think good coaches second year tend to be the bump for them, think of this as year 1. That's the way to look at this for Tennessee.
Right, and so going to a bowl game in year 0, that to your point is pretty exciting if you're a Tennessee fan.
That's your goal. Next year is where you can start to hope for things.
Absolutely.
I'm happy with competency.
Okay, so we're going to look at our predictions. Who's going to go to Atlanta? Is it going to be what everyone's predicting, Georgia, Bama?
I think it is, but I think with the talent of Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Auburn, and LSU, someone's tripping up Bama over this, right? Like, I don't think they're getting through unscathed. I don't know who it's going to be. I kind of feel like Auburn's the drunk 16 teenager that's going down the highway. Like, they're going to just wreck shop. Might be just themselves, a couple freshman quarterbacks, but could be somebody else on accident. somebody's going to trip them up. They're going to be very good. They're probably not going to be quite as high as they were last year, but someone's going to trip them up in a game that everyone's really excited, but it's not going to prevent them from being able to go. And I'll take Georgia as well, but a little less confidence on the Georgia side, probably just because I think you're not going to have the lower tier beating each other up quite as much, which just means you have a little less room for error more than anything else. It's not really a team quality as much as it's a room for error level for them. But I expect Georgia to come in losing a game somewhere as well along the ways. I think at Auburn looks like the game to me that if some weirdness happens, that it could definitely be there. But yeah, it's going to be those two head to head, and it's going to be a playing game for the playoff. Whoever wins goes. Whoever doesn't, they're out.
I think as much as I want to say, I think I saw Tony Barnhart, college football analyst, basically predicts Georgia to go undefeated going into this game. I would love to agree with that, but I think the game with Texas A&M is going to be a very difficult game for them. And I would love, like I said, I would love to see them go undefeated. I do see Bama going unscathed. I think they're going to get through just based on that season last year that they had. I'm a little bit concerned with Sarkisian coming back and the coordinators, but it is Bama. It's kind of like talking about –
they lose their coordinators every year and nothing changes. I don't know how they do that. But
exactly.
It's fine.
So I think they're going to go through, like I was saying earlier. I mean, I don't see LSU going into Tuscaloosa and winning that game. I just don't see anybody beating them. So that brings us to Georgia and Alabama SEC title. Who's going to take it home?
Georgia's got to prove it to me. That's the way I'm going to look at it. Give me Alabama in that matchup. I think Georgia's inability to throw the ball consistently, even though I think Fromm is very good, and I think if they get down at any point in the game, that trouble will ensue. And God help them with a backup quarterback.
Yeah, DeJuan Mathis or Stetson Bennett, I believe, would be the two names we would insert there. One of them being
Mathis throws a pass for Georgia this year. Well, let me just tell you guys, it's going to be a rough season.
It'll be rough. There's no doubt about it. But if anyone besides Tua throws a pass or anyone besides Trevor Lawrence throws a pass, how do those seasons look? So, I mean, you could say that
better than if DeJuan Mathis, because I will be shocked if he makes it through this year on the team. But that's my thought. DeJuan Mathis, Michigan State wouldn't take that guy.
Well, we're going with Stetson Bennett then. We'll see how he does.
Stetson Bennett, yeah. Hopes on him.
Either way, it would not be good if we lose old Fromm. But anyways, I'm going to go with Georgia, though. I think Fromm stays healthy. I think Zamir White is going to be a breakout candidate this year. I think that offensive line is the best in college football. I think they're going to put out multiple first-round picks that are going to be NFL players. And I think you'll see Kirby get them over the hump. So that puts them in the college football playoff. I think both teams will be in the playoff, and then we'll have to see how it goes from there. But I'm taking the Dogs. You're going with Bama in the SEC. Any other thoughts on the SEC, Sean?
Yeah, I think the SEC is not something you can always describe as a fun conference. Even if they're good and even if they're competitive, right? Like, it's not always a fun conference to be able to be in. I think it's going to be fun this year. They finally have some quarterback play that's going to be pretty good. I don't think the offenses are going to be anemic as they have at times in the past. I think it's going to be competitive. Like I said, I already think both Georgia and Alabama are going to lose a game in the regular season. It's going to be something to tune into for sure, because even those second-tier games, I think, are going to be fun, exciting, and quality.
Absolutely. We're going to go ahead and wrap up for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. You can find us on Twitter, ACS Sport Talk, on Facebook, Armchair Sports Talk, and on YouTube, Armchair Sports Talk page. Also, check out Mr. Sean Hicks. He's been going in depth and taking a look at all the teams in the SEC, and we're actually going to go conference by conference over the next couple weeks. So please check all those out, contribute, like, and follow. And with that, my name is Brandon Harris, and for Sean Hicks, have a great night.
Bye, guys.